Hello, I present an introduction to the abdomen. The body is divided into few regions: the head and neck, the trunk, and the appendages or the limbs. The trunk is further subdivided into an upper part called the thorax and a lower part called the abdomen. Both are separated by a partition called the diaphragm or the thoraco-abdominal diaphragm. Hence, the abdomen can be defined as the part of the trunk which lies below the diaphragm or the thoraco-abdominal diaphragm. The abdomen consists of walls which form its boundaries and enclose a large cavity called the abdominal cavity. This cavity contains many important organ systems. Let us start with the boundaries or the walls of the abdomen. Superiorly forming the roof is the thoraco-abdominal diaphragm or the diaphragm which separates it from the thorax. Inferiorly, the floor is again formed by two diaphragms, anteriorly urogenital and posteriorly pelvic diaphragm, which separate it from the perineum. The two walls, anterior and posterior. The anterior wall is firm and elastic to allow expansion. It is musculofibrous, containing flat abdominal muscles and their aponeurosis. It also extends laterally. The posterior wall, on the other hand, is rigid to provide support to the organs present in the abdominal cavity. Hence, it is osteomusculofacial, consisting of bones, that is the lumbar vertebra and the sacrum, muscles of the posterior abdominal wall like the psoas major, quadratus lumborum, and the fascia covering them. The abdominal walls surround or enclose a large cavity called the abdominal cavity. This can be further subdivided into an upper large abdomen proper and a lower smaller pelvic cavity. These are separated by the plane of the pelvic inlet. This is a circular aperture also called the pelvic brim. It is bounded posteriorly by the sacral promontory and all around by a line called the linea terminalis. This linea terminalis, anteriorly starting from the pubic symphysis, consists of the pubic crest, the pectineal line or the pecten pubis, the arcuate line, and the anterior margin of the ala. Thus, this pelvic brim or plane of pelvic inlet separates or subdivides the abdominal cavity into the upper abdomen proper and the lower pelvic cavity. The abdominal cavity contains two major organ systems. Firstly is the gastrointestinal tract, starting from the abdominal part of the esophagus up to the anal canal, including the glands of GIT like the liver, gallbladder, and pancreas. The other important organ system is the GUT or the genitourinary tract. It contains the urinary system and the reproductive glands. Coming to the surface landmarks, these are very important as they provide an orientation to the clinician regarding the location of the various viscera present in the abdominal cavity. Let us start with the bony landmarks. Superiorly, in the midline lies the xiphoid process of sternum. Extending from the xiphoid process downwards on both the sides is the costal margin. And this angle formed by the costal margins and the xiphoid process is also called the infrasternal angle or the subcostal angle. Inferiorly, in the midline lies the pubic symphysis. Lateral to it lies the pubic tubercle, and extending from the pubic symphysis to pubic tubercle is the pubic crest. Laterally lies the bony iliac crest. The anterior end of this iliac crest forms the anterior superior iliac spine. Now coming to the soft tissue landmarks, the inguinal ligament, it also forms the fold of the groin which separates the abdomen from the thigh. It extends from the anterior superior iliac spine up to the pubic tubercle. In the midline, extending from the xiphoid process to the pubic symphysis is a linear depression called the linea alba. This is formed by the median raphe of the abdominal muscles and divides the abdominal cavity into right and left halves. In the middle of this linea alba, slightly below the middle, lies a small depressed or elevated scar tissue called the umbilicus. Lateral to the linea alba are two curved lines extending from the tip of the ninth costal cartilage up to the pubic tubercle. These semilunar lines are called the linea semilunaris. These form the lateral edge of the rectus sheath. Extending from the linea alba up to the linea semilunaris, we can see transverse lines which form the tendinous intersections of the rectus abdominis muscles, usually present above the level of the umbilicus. Some vertebral levels are important. Let us discuss them. The xiphoid process, it lies usually at the level of the ninth thoracic vertebra close to its lower border. The subcostal plane, that is an imaginary transverse line joining the lowest part of the costal margins. This lies at the level of L3 vertebra. The highest point of the iliac crest and an imaginary transverse line joining these highest points is also called the supracristal plane. It lies at the level of L4. The umbilicus lies between these two lines or planes, that is, between the subcostal and the supracristal plane. Umbilicus therefore lies between L3 and L4 vertebral levels. The anterior superior iliac spine corresponds to the level of the sacral promontory and the pubic symphysis corresponds to the level of the coccyx. These vertebral levels are important. In order to facilitate the identification and description of the location of various viscera in the abdomen, clinicians divide the abdomen into 9 regions with the help of 2 horizontal planes and 2 vertical planes. The 2 horizontal planes are the transpyloric plane and the intertubercular plane. The vertical planes are the right and left lateral planes, also called the mid-clavicular planes. Starting with the transpyloric plane of Addison, it is the midpoint between the suprasternal notch and the pubic symphysis, or we can say the midpoint between the xiphisternal joint and the umbilicus, roughly a hand's breadth below the xiphoid process. It passes anteriorly through the tip of the ninth costal cartilage and posteriorly it lies at the lower level of the first lumbar vertebra. The intertubercular plane, it is a transverse line joining the tubercles of the iliac crest. The tubercle of the iliac crest lies approximately 5 centimeters behind the anterior superior iliac spine, and this intertubercular plane passes through the upper part of body of the fifth lumbar vertebra. The vertical planes are also called the right and left lateral planes. They join the mid-inguinal point, that is, the midpoint between the pubic symphysis and the anterior superior iliac spine, with the mid-clavicular point, also called the mid-clavicular planes. The transpyloric plane of Addison is very important and is also called the key plane of abdomen because many important structures lie at this level. Mainly it passes through the first lumbar vertebra. It also lies at the level of the pylorus of stomach, hence called the transpyloric plane. It also crosses the pancreatic neck, the duodenojejunal flexure, and the tip of the ninth costal cartilage, which corresponds to the fundus of the gallbladder. This is the same level as the hilum of the kidneys, the origin of the portal vein and the superior mesenteric artery, the second part of duodenum, the transverse mesocolon, hilum of spleen, and also the termination of the spinal cord. So many important structures lie at this level, hence called the key plane of the abdomen. The 9 regions of the abdomen, starting in the midline, we have from above downwards the epigastric region, the umbilical region, and the hypogastrium. Hence, in the midline from above downwards, epigastrium, below it umbilicus, and the lowermost is the hypogastrium. On either side, that is right and left, from above downwards, we have the hypochondriac region, which lies just below the chondra or the cartilages, then the lumbar region, and the lowermost related to the iliac crest is the iliac region. The 9 regions of the abdomen. Let us revise the important planes. The transpyloric plane of Addison or the key plane is a transverse line drawn midway between the suprasternal notch and the pubic symphysis. It lies at the first lumbar vertebral level. The subcostal plane is a transverse line between the lowest points of the costal margins and corresponds to the third lumbar vertebral level. The supracristal plane, it is a line drawn between the highest points of the iliac crest and corresponds to L4 level. The intertubercular plane joins the 2 tubercles of the iliac crest and corresponds to the 5th lumbar vertebral level. The 2 lateral vertical planes join the mid-clavicular point with the mid-inguinal point and are also called the mid-clavicular planes. An important soft tissue landmark on the anterior abdominal wall is the umbilicus. It is present in the midline, a little below the midpoint of the linea alba. It presents as an irregular, usually depressed or sometimes elevated area and is the attachment of the fetal end of the umbilical cord. It is formed by dense fibrous tissue which leaves a scar. Hence, it can be defined as a normal scar present in the anterior abdominal wall which is formed by the remnants of the root of the umbilical cord. The position of the umbilicus is usually at the level of the intervertebral disc between L3 and L4, that is between the subcostal plane and the intercristal plane. However, this position is variable depending upon the age and the fat. It usually lies at a lower level in infants and people with a pendulous fatty abdomen. The umbilicus has a lot of embryological importance, that is, it is the meeting point of the 4 folds of the embryonic plate, that is the head fold, the tail fold and the 2 lateral folds. At the same time, it is also a point where 3 important systems meet, that is the vascular system, the GIT and the urinary system in the embryo. The vascular system consists of the umbilical vessels which lie at this level. The GIT consists of the vitellointestinal duct, also called the omphalomesenteric duct. It forms a communication between the primitive midgut and the yolk sac. The urinary system consists of the allantoic diverticulum or the allantois, which communicates from the primitive cloaca to the umbilical cord. Later in life, it obliterates to form the urachus or the median umbilical ligament, which extends from the apex of the urinary bladder to the umbilicus. The congenital anomalies associated with the umbilicus may be due to patency of the vitellointestinal duct or the allantoic diverticulum. The patency of the vitellointestinal duct may be present throughout its course, forming a connection or a fistula between the midgut and the umbilicus, through which fecal matter may pass. This is known as the vitelline fistula or a fecal fistula. Sometimes only the proximal part of the duct may remain patent, forming a small diverticulum from the ileum called the Meckel's diverticulum. If only the distal part of this duct is patent, it forms a reddish tumor at the level of the umbilicus called the raspberry tumor. Only the middle part of the duct may remain patent, forming a small cyst called the vitelline cyst or a enterocystoma. Similarly, in case of the allantoic diverticulum, if the complete diverticulum remains patent, it forms a fistula through which urine passes, called the urinary fistula. If the middle part is patent, it forms a urachal cyst, and if only the distal part is patent, it forms a sinus from the umbilicus called the urachal sinus. Another important anomaly seen in the region of the umbilicus is the umbilical hernia. It is defined as the protrusion of abdominal contents in the region of the umbilicus. The types of umbilical hernia can be a physiological umbilical hernia, that is, normally during early fetal life, some loops of midgut herniate out of the abdomen in the region of the umbilicus. However, at around 10th to 12th week of intrauterine life, these loops normally re-enter the abdomen, hence called a physiological umbilical hernia. If this condition persists after birth, it is known as a congenital umbilical hernia or an omphalocele or exomphalos. Sometimes in later life, the weakness of the anterior abdominal wall may lead to an acquired umbilical hernia. Another condition associated with the failure of development of the infraumbilical part of the anterior abdominal wall is known as ectopia vesicae. In this case, the urinary bladder is exposed and can be seen on the surface of the body. Coming to the anatomical importance of the umbilicus. The skin in the region of the umbilicus is supplied by the 10th thoracic intercostal nerve, which also supplies other important viscera like the appendix and gonads. Hence, any disease of these viscera may lead to referred pain in the umbilical region due to a common segmental innervation by the T10 spinal nerve. The umbilicus is an important site of portocaval anastomosis, that is, para-umbilical veins which are tributaries of the portal vein, anastomose with tributaries of the vena cava. Therefore, in case of portal hypertension, these veins become dilated and tortuous and give the appearance of spokes of a wheel radiating from the umbilicus. This condition is called caput medusae. The region of the umbilicus acts as a watershed line, that is, venous blood and lymph do not cross this umbilical plane. The lymph and venous blood flow upwards above this plane and downwards below this plane. This horizontal line across the umbilicus thus acts as a watershed line for venous blood and lymphatics. The anterior abdominal wall is made up of 8 layers. From outer to inner they are skin, superficial fascia. The superficial fascia is further subdivided into a superficial fatty layer called Camper's fascia and a deep membranous layer called Scarpa's fascia. Deep fascia is absent on the anterior abdominal wall to allow its expansion. Therefore, after superficial fascia come the muscular layers. The muscles consist of 3 flat muscles. From outer to inner they are external oblique, internal oblique and transversus abdominis. Inner to the transversus abdominis lies a layer of fascia called fascia transversalis. Deep to it lies the extraperitoneal connective tissue and then the parietal peritoneum which lines the inner surface of the anterior abdominal wall. In the region of the anterior abdominal wall, the deep fascia is absent to allow expansion. Hence, the superficial fascia above the umbilicus consists of a single layer. However, below the umbilicus, it can be divided into 2 layers, a superficial fatty layer called Camper's fascia and a deep membranous layer called Scarpa's fascia. The superficial fatty Camper's fascia is continuous with the subcutaneous fat of the adjoining areas, and over the scrotum it is replaced by Darto's muscle. The deep membranous layer of Scarpa's fascia is made up of elastic fibrous tissue and it is continuous below with a similar membranous layer of superficial fascia in the perineum called Colles fascia, and over the penis it is known as Buck's fascia. In the lower limb it is attached to the deep fascia of the thigh called fascia lata along a line known as Holden's line. This Holden's line lies just lateral to the pubic tubercle and extends laterally for 8 centimeters. It is attached from the pubic tubercle along the body of the pubis, along the margins of the pubic arch, and to the posterior border of the perineal membrane. In the median plane, this fascia is attached to the linea alba. The importance of this Holden's line and attachment of the Scarpa's fascia to the fascia lata is that in case of urethral rupture, this attachment prevents the extravasation of urine into the thigh. The cutaneous nerve supply of the anterior abdominal wall. It is mainly supplied by the anterior and lateral cutaneous branches of the 6th to 12th intercostal nerves. In the lower part, it is also supplied by the first lumbar nerve through two branches, that is, the iliohypogastric and the ilioinguinal nerves. The arterial supply is mainly through the anterior cutaneous arteries, which are branches of the superior and inferior epigastric arteries, the lateral cutaneous arteries, which are branches of the posterior intercostal arteries. The lower part of the abdominal wall is also supplied by the three superficial branches of the femoral artery, that is, superficial external pudendal, superficial inferior epigastric, and the superficial circumflex iliac arteries. The umbilical plane acts as a watershed line, that is, it is not crossed by the venous blood or the lymphatics. Hence, venous drainage above the umbilicus is into the axillary veins and below the umbilicus is into the great saphenous vein. However, along the lateral side of the thoracic abdominal wall, we have a linear communication called the thoracoepigastric vein. It forms an anastomosis between the lateral thoracic vein and the superficial epigastric vein. The lymphatic drainage above the umbilicus is into the axillary lymph nodes and below the umbilicus into the superficial inguinal lymph nodes. Hence, any infection or malignancy in the lower part of the abdominal wall will cause a swelling in the groin, and a similar lesion in the upper abdominal wall will produce a swelling in the axilla. However, the malignancies or infections of the umbilicus will have a widespread lymphatic spread. The clinical importance of the superficial veins of the anterior abdominal wall. As already discussed during portal hypertension, the para-umbilical veins become dilated and tortuous, and this condition is known as caput medusae. These radiate from the umbilicus and resemble the serpents on the head of Medusa, a character from the Greek mythology, hence the name given caput medusae. In case of vena cava obstruction, the thoracoepigastric veins, which are present on the lateral edge of the anterior abdominal wall, become enlarged and open up. However, the flow of blood through these thoracoepigastric veins will differ. In case of superior vena cava obstruction, the blood will flow downwards into the inferior vena cava, whereas in case of inferior vena cava obstruction, the blood will flow upwards to be drained through the superior vena cava. Thank you and a happy learning.